Cell B-150, that's the one. If you ever go to Alcatraz, walk past the gift shop, past the tour groups, past the audio guide telling you where to look, and find cell B-150. Crouch down and look at the back wall. There's a hole there. Small, deliberate, dug by hand, inch by inch, night after night, with a spoon. A spoon. And the man who made that hole had an IQ of 133, was serving a 14-year sentence, and had already escaped from every other prison they'd ever put him in. His name was Frank Morris, and on the night of June 11th, 1962, he and two other men crawled through that hole, climbed to the roof of the most secure federal prison in American history, slid down a pipe, and walked into the bay. The FBI never found them, hasn't closed the case since. That was 63 years ago. If you're into stories that don't have clean endings, real ones with real people and real stakes, hit subscribe right now. We do this every week. Alcatraz. The name alone does something to people. Say it in a room and watch heads turn. It sits 1.25 miles off the San Francisco waterfront, which sounds like nothing until you're standing on the shore at night staring at those lights, and you realize the bay between you and that island is basically a living thing. The currents don't just pull, they redirect, they confuse, they exhaust. The cold alone can incapacitate a swimmer before they've covered a third of the distance. The Federal Bureau of Prisons didn't just pick that location because it looked dramatic. They picked it because the geography did half the prison's job for them. The island had been a military fortification before it became a federal penitentiary in 1934. It opened at a very specific moment in American history. Prohibition had just ended, organized crime was at full boil, and the public was terrified. The government needed somewhere to put the men who had become symbols, John Dillinger types, people whose very names generated newspaper headlines. Alcatraz was the answer to a PR problem as much as a security problem. Send them somewhere the public can barely see, but definitely knows exists. At its peak, Alcatraz held around 250 to 275 inmates at any one time. It was never the largest prison, it was the most controlled. The ratio of guards to inmates was higher than almost anywhere else in the federal system. The rules were brutal in their specificity. You earned privileges. You started with almost nothing. Food, shelter, clothing, medical care, those were given. Everything else, including the right to speak in certain areas, you had to earn back through compliance. And yet, 36 men tried to escape over the 29 years Alcatraz operated as a federal penitentiary. 23 were caught and returned. 6 were shot and killed during escape attempts. 2 drowned and their bodies were recovered. And 5 are listed officially as presumed drowned, bodies never recovered. That's the official story. That's what the Bureau of Prisons closed the books on. But the most famous escape attempt in the island's history? That one didn't just haunt the Bureau of Prisons, it haunted the FBI for decades after. June 11, 1962. That's the date. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin did not wake up that morning and decide to escape. They had been planning for months, quietly, obsessively, with a level of patience that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around when you understand what they were working with. Sit with that timeline for a second. Months inside one of the most surveilled facilities in America. They used spoons and a makeshift drill improvised from a vacuum cleaner motor to dig through the moisture-softened concrete around the ventilation grates in their cells. The walls at the back of those cells were old. The salt air and years of dampness had done work on them. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. And Morris, who had an IQ that was tested at 133, saw what other men had missed, that the weakness wasn't in the bars, it wasn't in the guards, it was in the building itself. While they dug, they covered the holes with painted cardboard replicas of the vent grills. Every morning, those fake vents went up. Every night, they came back down, and the digging continued. They also constructed dummy heads, papier-mâché faces made from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop, and placed them in their beds to fool the nightly head counts. The guards walked past those dummies in the dark and saw sleeping men. That detail never stops being wild to me. These guys were making art projects in one of America's most notorious prisons, and it worked. They accessed a utility corridor above the cell block, which became their staging area. Up there, out of sight, they assembled a raft and life preservers made from more than 50 stolen raincoats that had been heat-sealed together. They had a makeshift bellows, a concertina, to inflate it. They had paddles. The plan was not improvised desperation, it was engineered. On the night of June 11, 1962, Frank Morris and the Anglins climbed out through the ventilation shaft on the roof, slid down a kitchen vent pipe, and made their way to the water edge on the northeast corner of the island. A fourth man, Alan West, was supposed to go with them. He had planned the whole thing, but when the night came, his vent grill wasn't loose enough. He was still working on it when the other three left without him. He never made it out. He woke up the next morning still in his cell, and when they came for him, he told them everything. The FBI investigation that followed was one of the most intensive manhunts the Bureau had ever run. They chased leads for years, decades. Officially, the case was transferred to the U.S. Marshals Service in 1979 and remains technically open to this day. No confirmed bodies, no confirmed captures, no confirmed anything. What they did find, pieces of the raft and a life preserver washed up near Angel Island and the Marin County shoreline in the days after. Personal effects, a waterproof bag with photographs and addresses belonging to the Anglin family. That bag was prepared specifically for the escape. It wasn't debris from a drowning, it looked like something dropped in the water by someone who was moving. And here's where it gets into territory that the official story has never fully resolved. In 2013, the U.S. Marshals announced they had received a letter postmarked 2013 claiming to be from John Anglin, then in his 80s, saying all three men had survived. The letter offered to turn himself in exchange for medical care and a reduced sentence of no more than a year. Handwriting analysts were divided. The FBI said the letter didn't change their conclusion that the men most likely drowned. The Marshals said they believed the letter was genuine. That disagreement is still sitting there unresolved, right out in the open between two federal agencies. The Anglin family has maintained for decades that they received Christmas cards from John and Clarence through the 1960s, that a woman they identified as a contact received communication from the brothers. A 2015 documentary included a photograph that family members identified as John and Clarence, taken in Brazil in 1975, 13 years after the escape, looking older but alive. Forensic experts who analyzed that photo said it was consistent with the men's ages and physical characteristics. The FBI reviewed it and said it was inconclusive. That word inconclusive has done a lot of heavy lifting in this story for a very long time. Here's what I keep coming back to. Alcatraz closed in 1963, less than a year after this escape. The official reason was cost. It was extraordinarily expensive. Everything had to be brought to the island by boat. The infrastructure was crumbling. But the timing, the most famous escape in the prison's history happens in June 1962. The prison closes March 1963. The Bureau of Prisons will tell you those facts are unrelated, and maybe they are, but you're allowed to sit with a coincidence. The island is a national park now. 1.4 million people visit it every year. They walk through those cell blocks, they look at the hole in the back of cell B-150 where Frank Morris dug his way into the utility corridor, and they stand in the same space where three men built a raft from raincoats and decided that 50-degree water and a mile and a quarter of churning bay current was a better bet. We will probably never know for certain what happened to Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers after they hit that water. The official position is that they drowned. The evidence is genuinely ambiguous. What isn't ambiguous is that they pulled off something that the entire architecture of that island was built to make impossible. They read the building, they read the schedule, they read the water, and then they went. Whether they made it or not, that part of the story belongs to them. If this is the kind of story you can't stop thinking about after it's over, the kind with real stakes, real people, and questions that don't have clean answers, you're in the right place. Subscribe. New video every week. I'll see you in the next one.